Good evening, and welcome to Lawyers on the Line. I am Stephanie Balmer, a partner with the Falsani, Balmer, Peterson, and Balmer law firm, and this evening's moderator. Tonight's topic is our local treatment courts. Duluth has one of the oldest drug treatment courts in the state, and now has several specialty courts that feature collaborations between individuals and the courts, probation, attorneys, social workers, law enforcement, and treatment providers. These teams work with individuals to succeed in the programs in order to save money, increase public safety, reduce crime, and help the offenders and their families. Here is tonight's panel. Lindsay Snustad, Chief Treatment Coordinator, Lead Treatment Coordinator, Chief Judge Sally Tarnowski of the 6th Judicial District, and Tony Tomeno, a graduate of the treatment courts. So we'll start tonight, I guess we'll start with you, Chief Judge. Can you tell us just a little bit about the background of treatment courts and what is a treatment court?
Sure. So treatment courts have been around now for a bit, and we've got 8 of them in our district. They are essentially a model that tries to treat our offenders in a manner that is involves much more supervision, much more support. The offenders come in, and generally they're based on their offense. If they committed a felony DWI or in drug court, we also have mental health courts, we have veterans courts, and we have some kind of combination of some of those. So essentially we're bringing people in who are high risk, high need, they are high risk to reoffend, they have lots of needs. They have substance abuse addictions or disorders, and in the case of in mental health court, they have a mental illness that has caused them to intersect with the criminal justice system in a manner that that is due to their substance abuse or to their mental illness. And so they come into the court because standard probation probably just isn't going to work for them because of their high risk and high needs.
Okay. And Lindsay, are you able to give us some examples of what these teams look like and what kind of efforts are made, what the plan looks like for some of these individuals?
Yeah, so pretty much any of the folks on our staffing teams, probation officers, the judge, the coordinator, social workers, therapists, case managers, prosecuting attorneys, defense lawyers, anyone can make a referral to our treatment courts. And like the chief said, we have 8 in the Arrowhead region, 4 here out of the St. Louis County Courthouse. And they've committed crimes. So these folks have committed some kind of crime. They're facing jail time, and they have an option. Our treatment courts are voluntary. They have to meet a certain set of needs, and they have to be eligible for the program. We want to take the folks that are high risk for reoffending. And so the staffing model looks at every single case to determine if it's going to be a good fit for either a mental health court or a DWI court. We like to say yes versus no, and we know that if we take them in as quickly as possible, we have a better chance of helping them out.
Okay. And Tony, we have you here with us tonight. You're kind of our star guest. No pressure.
Some would say otherwise.
Well, I know. We got these cameras looking at us. So can you tell us a little bit what your experience with one of the treatment courts has been?
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, I was a participant in mental health court. I graduated in 2014, and it saved my life. I committed a pretty high-profile crime back in 2010. And with the work of a lot of people, Dan Liu, who's the chief public defender, kept on coming to see me, and I was looking at a few years around there. And after about 4 months, I kind of broke and thought I'd give it a chance. But in reality, there's a big part of me that thought I could just get out, breeze through it, and get back to my life of doing and selling drugs. And I learned otherwise. They took me in 2010. I had a pretty much operating on the fringes of society for years before I got in there, and it was very difficult for me. because one of the biggest things that I learned in the court is you can't get through mental health court with Judge Tarnowski unless there's honesty and transparency. And if you're not doing what you're supposed to they know already. But the connections they have with getting you in, so you have this problem, okay, so we'll send you to that doctor, or we'll get you in to see them, and they just stay on top of it until you kind of get in the role of it.
It sounds like you had a lot of people that you worked with, a lot of people that you were communicating with on a frequent basis.
Yeah,
Is that right?
well, that's a lot of people cared,
Okay.
and that's what I learned. I'm not saying nobody didn't care about me before I got into mental health court, because that wouldn't be true, but these folks really care.
Okay.
And it took me a while to graduate. I violated a couple times, and I went to NERC for 4 months on one of my violations, and I had a court date, and NERC brought me to see the judge, and I told her I wanted to execute my sentence and just be done with it, and she wouldn't let me. And they sent me back to NERC, and I did my time up there, and just kind of made me realize how much they care. I mean, I had a judge telling me she wasn't going to let me finish out my sentence, and that really struck a chord with me, and it made me really turn me into a believer right then, kind of.
And so what I'm hearing is that it sounds like you've had a pretty personal relationship with Judge Tarnowski.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. I mean, like I said, my crime was pretty high profile. In 2010, it was a bank robbery, which is a federal crime, and I was in jail, and I thought that I was gonna get picked up by the feds and do my 5 years, because that's what it is. And they didn't, and I sat in county, and I had a lot of people working for me behind the scenes. I had a lot of people who cared about me when I didn't care about myself. So.
Judge, the very personal aspect that it seems is running through the theme here, is that similar to or different in how we handle other cases involving offenders?
Yeah, much different.
Okay.
So, we strive to get, they say that the relationship that the participant has with the judge is one of the most important facets of a treatment court. And it's really quite incredible to watch an individual, and Tony's a prime example of this. The first several weeks that they come into court, and I'm trying to establish rapport with them, and how you doing, Tony? Good. Anything new? No. Anything you want to talk about? No. And but eventually they start opening up a little bit, but they still really, they're coming into a courtroom, which really courtrooms are pretty intimidating places. I mean, even as a lawyer, the first few times I walked into a courtroom, I was pretty intimidated, and their experience in a courtroom hasn't been very good. And so not only are they in a courtroom, there's the judge, and there's the probation officer, and there's the prosecutor, and we're expecting them to come in and tell us, not only what's going well, but what challenges they've had. And to finally reach the level where they trust us enough to, Tony's just such a good example of this. He came in one day and he said, "Judge, I got something bad to tell you. I used over the weekend, and I used a really bad drug." We wouldn't have caught him that time. But he knew he could trust us. He could reach out for help from us, and he knew when he told me that the rest of the team was going to wrap their arms around him and help him and give him what he needed, not throw him into jail, but rather, get him the treatment and the support that he needed at that moment. So that twist of turning that into trust was phenomenal.
Absolutely. And so we go by little successes in mental health court. For some people, it's taking their meds for 2 weeks without missing a dose. It's a huge accomplishment. And, I can't speak for everybody who has a mental illness, but from a lot of people I have met, we already kind of feel down here below people. So when you have that amount of care, it's hard to believe it's real. And the trust, when the trust gets built, that's when the healing starts. And there's people who've graduated. I can only speak for the judge's court, but there's some people doing some phenomenal things around town that have graduated in her court.
Including you.
Thanks.
And it's clear that the relationships that were built and some of the lessons that were learned, you're still carrying through, because I mean, you're still clearly happy to see Judge Tarnowski. And
Yeah, absolutely. Mental health court is kind of in my conscience, and I did reoffend after mental health court, but I pulled myself up and I knew exactly what I had to do from what I learned in there. I knew I had to reach out to resources and do whatever I could. And I'm going on almost 4 years of being clean and sober.
I think that brings up a good point. You know, we aren't expecting that people are going to be perfect once they graduate. What we're trying to do really is give them lifelong connections to recovery and skills and tools that will aid them in the future, because you know they're still going to stumble. We all stumble from time to time, and so it's learning how to pick yourself up from the stumbling.
Yeah,
that's the important thing.
We developed a lot of coping skills in the court.
okay.
I mean, we really got to see the whole mental health court team. Everyone who was involved in it is unbelievable. There is a story I do want to tell, which I have so much respect for the judge, because there was some members talking in the jury box. That's where they sit. And Judge Tarnowski turned over and gave them a tongue lashing because they were talking during court, and I was like, wow, like, she's even going to give it to them too, so I knew it was serious.
She runs a tight ship. I know that. Yeah, yeah. Well, and this theme of you know that not everybody's perfect. What are the differences in these treatment programs for if someone stumbles a little bit during the program? Is that treated the same as someone outside of the program, or what are the guidelines
Well,
there?
if you're on standard probation, you'd probably have a similar response in terms of the probation officer would have a conversation with you about what would need to be done. You might be reassessed for treatment, and we would do that as well. We want to make sure that we have a treatment response when the stumble is a use.
Okay.
If somebody is missing treatment, not going to therapy, not taking their meds, we would have some graduated sanctions that would kind of gently send the message, and then a little more difficult, and a little more difficult, and you know, we really are teaching skills,
Okay.
and we want people to pick up on the skills.
We have a question from a caller. The question is about if there are income limits for offenders, and if so, if there's too high of an income, are there other options?
That is not even something that we look at.
Income is not a factor.
Not a factor. We look at, we screen for mental health court, at least. We screen for mental illness. We screen for high risk, high need. And in our case, in mental health court case, we look at felony offenders. So we generally don't take any lower level offenders than felonies. We make some exceptions from time to time, but we're looking for people with serious and persistent mental illness who've committed a felony and who are high risk, high need. The other courts, DWI court, for example, would look at felony DWIs, again, though high risk, high need, and then drug court have drug offenses or related, maybe a burglary or something that relates to their drug use.
Okay, so it sounds like the analysis is more to do with the gravity of the offense and the recurrence and things like that.
And the risk and need, yeah.
Okay. Tony, I have a question about these treatment programs, or the one that you've been in at least. Would you characterize the program as easy, or was this something that you really had to work hard at?
Extremely difficult.
Okay.
Yeah, there isn't, for anyone who doesn't know, I can only speak for mental health court because that's what I was in.
Sure.
But there was change if you graduated. There was some kind of significant change. Absolutely. And it's very difficult because especially if you're, I can speak for myself. I mean, I lied more than I told the truth before I got into mental health court. And the judge's biggest thing is honesty, and transparency is the biggest thing.
Did you pick up any lessons or reminders that you're still using from?
Yeah, absolutely. So we learned a lot of coping skills, and there was a lot of options, and we were directed to a lot of people that could help us. And the one thing I do is I have a journal, and I started that in February of 2016, and I haven't missed a day of journaling. And the judge often recommended that to people, as well as exercise. Exercise is a relatively easy way to combat a lot of mental health symptoms. There's a lot of studies on it.
Okay.
Very good for the mind.
One of the things that I think is so cool about the treatment courts is that it's based in a concept called therapeutic jurisprudence, and that's really taking a look at the role of the law as a therapeutic agent and just recognizing how much power the courts have over shaping a person's physical and psychological well-being. And therefore, we're very well positioned to be able to serve as change agents for folks like Tony and help improve his life in that way.
Has there, I'll start with you, Lindsay, on this one. Has there been a lot of cooperation from the other partners in these programs? I mean, obviously,
Yeah.
if a judge says, you know, we need you to help with this,
Right.
but, you know, are we getting assistance from the medical community, for
Yes.
example?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's amazing. I've been doing mental health for a long time, and I've never seen a more succinct, more efficiently run approach to dealing with folks with substance use, with mental health concerns. We've got all the right people at the table. Instead of sending Tony to housing and then to, you know, treatment and then to chemical dependency, we have all of these experts sitting at the table, figuring out what can we do with Tony, and all the people that can make these decisions, including the judge, that we can then go forward and help him get on the path to recovery. A lot of the folks, a lot of the experts that sit at the table do it for free.
Okay.
It's amazing.
Wow.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Judge Tarnowski, are you able to give us some information or even data on why these programs are more effective than what I'll call just regular incarceration?
You know, I really think it is the relationships that are formed between the participants and the treatment team and the judge. It's the ability, you know, before court, every time we have court, we meet for an hour to an hour and a half, and we talk about each participant's achievements for the week, what needs to be done. If there is something that has occurred, you know, what would be the best response to that? Mm-hmm. And they're very individualized plans for each person, because each person has different needs and has different thinking and may interpret something differently than the next person. And so we really want to make sure that we've got that person in mind when we're you know, putting together their plan. The other thing is, I think there's a lot of encouragement. There's a lot of, you know, for a lot of our folks, and, you know, and Tony's parents came all the time, but a lot of our folks have, you know, they have no housing, they have no insurance, they don't have their medications, they've lost family or friends along the way because of, they've been difficult to deal with, they've been lying, or they've been, you know, really making things difficult for their family and friends. And so, you know, our approach really is to be that hand, that hug, that level of support, and to convince people, first of all, to ask for help, and secondly, to accept it when it's offered. And by and large, you know, it does take people a bit to get to that point because they're not used to it. But when they do, they've turned a corner.
I think one of the first things you guys do is ask folks to confront their issues, because oftentimes it's about some kind of pain or trauma that's caused a behavior that's caused a crime. And if we can get at the root of that, like you said, it's in front of a whole courtroom of people hearing you tell your story. But if we can really get at some of that trauma and some of that pain that caused you to commit some type of crime, then we're actually getting somewhere, and we can make a significant difference for the rest of your life.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. In recovery from drugs and alcohol and mental health, you have to change your beliefs. And that's a hard thing to do, especially if you're out there for so many years. And like the judge was talking, I'm fortunate for all the support I've had as far as my parents go. You know, life doesn't stop moving just because you graduate from court. My father was my best friend. He passed away last August. But I got through it, and the biggest part of my life is my 5-year-old son. And without mental health court, there wouldn't be no 5-year-old son. And I have a picture of my son when he was born sitting on the judge's lap. And she loves baby feet. And I'm not the only one who had kid while I was in there. She was right there with the kids, sitting on her lap. It's really unbelievable. It's not, I mean, you really couldn't make it up.
Yeah. The other thing that I think is so cool about the treatment court model is that in Judge Tarnowski's case, like, she's sitting at the same level with the participants in the program. She's not sitting high up on this bench and everybody else is below her. The power is as balanced as it can possibly be, which gives you the opportunity to be open and to be honest and to feel safe in her courtroom and help on your, help you with your journey. There's a lot of things that each of our judges do in their treatment courts to try to reduce some of that anxiety and that, the stress that comes with stepping into the courtroom. So.
You guys are really making these courts sound very effective. We're getting several calls about eligibility and how someone gets into these programs, these treatment courts. Essentially, I think I can summarize these questions. How does one get into the treatment court as opposed to following the traditional path? And we'll just start with that.
Typically, we get a referral from public defenders, probation officers, judges, prosecutors sometimes. The attorneys will have had a conversation with their client about this as a potential option for them because they've seen something either in their offense or in their background that causes them to think they might be a good fit for a treatment court. All of our attorneys are, in the district are very familiar with our treatment courts and know how successful they are. So when they find somebody that looks like they would be a good fit, they refer them to the court, and then the court will do a screening process to determine if that's an appropriate person to be in the court.
Is there a final say by anyone, or is that more of a group or team decision?
It really is based on objective criteria
Okay.
that each court has listed. I went through a little bit of ours, like I say, felony crime, SPMI designation, and then high risk, high needs. So if those criteria are met, we generally accept people unless there's something that would screen them out for some reason. Maybe a certain offense or something.
Tony, you've already told us a little bit about how successful the treatment court has been for you. Do you have any advice for anybody who's looking at this kind of wall before them in a similar situation?
My best advice would be to take a look around what your surroundings are, the people you're around, the things you're doing, and ask yourself, is this the best thing for me? Are these the best people for me to be around? I'm not saying I was around all these bad people, which I wasn't. I was around a lot of good people. A lot of good people who did drugs, a lot of good people with mental illness. But the courts really care a lot. And they're more, they have more knowledge and power to get you to change than you can if you're just all by yourself, trying to do it all by yourself. And once you get in, and honesty and transparency, that's where it starts, and you go from there.
Okay.
And change is hard. Change is hard for everybody, and keeping yourself. I mean, we've all tried to change something about ourselves, likely, and we all know how difficult it can be. So.
And I'm getting the impression, again, just from watching the interactions here this evening, that this is an ongoing process for everybody, that when there's a participant in the treatment court, there's, like you've mentioned, Tony, there are coping skills that are learned. And do you stay in touch, Tony, with people from treatment court?
I do,
Okay.
absolutely. I talk to Dan Lou probably a couple times a year, or I'll see him around town. Kim Davis, we can call at 3 o'clock in the morning and she'll give you a ride somewhere.
Oh, man.
Unbelievable people. Julie Seitz, I haven't seen her in a while, but she has done a lot for me.
Yeah.
Mike Bosch has done a lot for me. I hope I'm not missing anybody. I just I'm really humbled by it, very humbled by it. And like I said, I did reoffend, and I was more worried how that would look because I'm a graduate of mental health court, so I felt like I hurt the team. But I've been clean for 3.5 years, or a little more than that, going on 4 years. And my son is my life, and he's got a great mom. We're divorced. We get along well. I mean, the last year I went through a divorce and the death of my father, but I knew how to get through it because of the coping skills that I learned. I journal every day. I think I already said that. And the biggest thing, it might not sound like a hard thing to do, but a lot of us, we're really bad at taking our meds. So if you can take your meds, for a month straight without missing a dose. I haven't missed a dose in probably a year or two, maybe just one dose or whatever.
Sure.
So.
Wow. Okay. Wow, you are obviously a shining example here of our treatment course. So thank you.
I got a lot of help.
Yeah.
Before I got into mental health court, I thought asking for help was a weakness.
Yeah.
Well, that's all we have for tonight on Lawyers on the Line. Thanks to our guests and to all the viewers who called in with questions. I'm Stephanie Balmer. Join us again next week for a conversation about bodily injury, motor vehicles, and animals. Good night. Yeah,
That'll be great.
yeah, you can show your son if you feel like,
so
Tony.
Stephanie, I think that we should going forward, we should do one segment, like break down the different treatment
I think that
courts,
would be
right?
great. It
Yeah.
was, I tried.
Court stuff, we could do DWI, we could
Yeah.
do vets court, we could do drug
Yeah.
court.
Oh, there's vets court too. Oh, I did hear about that. That's right.
If we get
Hey.
folks, nice job, buddy. You did great. And I
Tony,
have your
thanks.
number.
It was so good to see you again. I'll see you around. Thanks again for doing this.
Funny what a small world,
Chester
huh?
Park. We went to elementary school together. I remember people. I have a weird thing. So
I remember people from elementary school.
Yeah, I do too.
Yeah.
Yeah. And sometimes I wish I could take that out and put other stuff that I wish I could remember in,
I
but
remember my best friend's phone number from.
I remember mine. 7242096 was Alyssa Charlton's. Well,
I could use some other room for.
yeah, I know, right? Note to self. Thanks a lot, Judge. And Lindsay, thanks a lot. We'll see you guys. Thank you. Nice to meet you.
Have a good night.
Yeah, you guys too.
Thank you.
I hate promos. I'm sorry. It's negative Nelly. It's the stress of waiting for the people upstairs. Oh yeah, sorry. I'm just gonna shave it off.
Picture here, please.
Again?
Yeah.
On top?
Yes.
Oops. Getting sideways. I see my hair that way and okay. Better?
Do dry run?
Oh. Go?
Yeah.
I'm Stephanie Balmer from the Falsani, Balmer, Peterson, and Balmer Law Firm. Watch Lawyers on the Line next time when a panel of attorneys answer your questions about bodily injury, motor vehicles, and animals. Watch Thursday night at 7:30 on PBS North.